What's going on, guys? M4 back with another update video for my Hobbit edit. So this is going to be an overview for the 2024 update. Yes, I am back. I just did the 2023 update. So what happened? Well, little context with that previous update in 2023. What the story with that is I took so much time off of editing. I thought I finished. I really did think it was finished, but after so much time, like it was over a year of rewatching the edit and reading comments and feedback, I did get a few ideas, and that's kind of bound to happen. And so that's why I came back and with a new fresh set of eyes, and I really looked at the whole thing and said, if there's anything I could do different, let's just try that. And so that's what the update is, and I thought it was done, but now we're back with another one. And what is the story here? Well, I figured that while I'm still invested in the project, I might as well go ahead and be safe and do one more final check through all of the source footage for the extended, theatrical, and appendices of The Hobbit to see if there's anything I could use and if it could work in my project. Because in previous updates, what I would do is just work with the existing timeline. I would mess around with clips and see if I could do things different based on new ideas. And with this update now, I actually went ahead and looked at the original sources, and I could truly see if there's a better way to do something. If I had a problem spot in my edit, is this really the best it can be? And I decided yes or no. And so, of course, in this update, there's going to be a few areas where I do think, yes, I could improve it more after looking at the source footage. So that's the story with this update. And now I can really feel that I truly am content with, this edit, knowing what I could have used in the source footage. Because in previous updates, I guess I kind of left a few stones unturned, that I didn't really go and try and do things from scratch and go look at go back to the drawing boards with some of these ideas. And so now I have done that, and so I feel much more confident about feeling like this is the last update. And another thing to back that up is basically, over the past few years, I've gained a lot of skills in editing, and so I think it's worth it to really go back and make sure everything is up to par, because a few of the scenes that I've edited actually were still from my original pass-through of this fan edit back in 2019 and 2020. So I've obviously learned a lot more since then, and so it's worth it to me to basically, I'll go over every single change in this video, but there's a few good examples where I've actually just redone the scene from scratch with my new skills. And so now I've basically done that whole method of updating and checking the source footage for the entire edit from beginning to end. And so, of course, luckily though, for me, part one pretty much is unchanged. There's nothing to talk about here because it's already been revised so much. So we're just going to go and skip to part two, and we're going to talk about our changes. So to start things off, we're going to go through a few of the lame ones just to get them out of the way, but I did make some additions later in this cut, and so I figured that it would be worth it to try to reduce runtime as much as possible, because another philosophy I've had with these updates is every time I release a new update, I want to keep the runtime about the same, because everyone knows what they're getting into now. When they've seen this edit, they know what they're signing up for. I don't want to go ahead and make an update and then now all of a sudden the edit is much shorter or much longer and it feels just different. So I don't want that to happen. I'm very conscious of making updates too much and ending up ruining things. That's why every time I make these updates and I'm going to tell you all of these changes I've been debating for months now and testing them and showing them on the Discord, showing them on other websites, and just seeing if there's any feedback or better ways to do it, or if it's even worth it to make these changes. So, and obviously I watch it on my computer, I export it, I watch it with speakers, with headphones, I watch it on the TV. So I try to make sure everything is flowing and is technically sound. I'm not going to just make a change in the editing software and then just boom, export it, we're done. I'm going to really consider it and really test it on lots of different mediums. Like I like to watch it on the TV with the big screen and the loudspeakers. It just is a different experience. So that's just another little bit of context. Now, the first few things are just to reduce runtime at the start. So in Mirkwood, if we go to when the company is kind of all dazed and lost right around here, I did make a trim just to reduce the runtime a bit. It didn't remove any dialogue, but that just saved some time. And then I also moved the dialogue for when they say they've lost the path to right here. I think it just fits better to be on this panning shot, because it is like overlaid dialogue. It's, we don't see the person talking. So instead of kind of just forcing it into this shot right here, when we have this longer panning shot in there in the distance, it just fits better, I feel like, and it's where the scene ends off. So then it just fits, it just fits well. That's really all there is to say. Then next up is when we get to the Woodland Realm. I did a whole test clip of a bunch of changes, but I'm actually going to only include 2 changes into this scene. So I really did consider including this scene with Tauriel, because it basically honored the book in 2 ways. It showed Bilbo wandering around And then it also showed him like listening in on people, I guess, which are just kind of two details that he kind of did in the book. But it was just a whole like 30 plus second long scene that really didn't add much. We already get the impression that Bilbo is wandering around when we have this, and he's listening into people. So yes, it's just more of what we like technically, but it's just not necessary, and it adds too much runtime. And also, it kind of hurts to include more Tariel. There's just like her character has kind of just been stained as not the best character because of so much bad fan reception. Even though the scene, she didn't really necessarily do anything wrong, and nothing against the actor, but I just felt like it's better to not include that scene, and it saves on runtime. I don't want it's just going to make the edit too long, and so that was my decision on that, if you're wondering. But anyways, if we're getting into the actual changes now, the first one is that I have included these shots from the appendices, and I've decided these are the only shots in the appendices that would fit in my edit. There were a couple more moments I wish I could have included, but they just didn't work, and so this is one of them, or the only one I should say, and it's Bomber and Biff are eating. If you want to know why this specifically is kind of a funny, good moment, you can read the description in my original test clip for this, but the overall reason for that shot, or both of these shots, and then also the shot of Keely is just that it really shows that the dwarves are bored and have been here for quite some time, because in this edit, well, and even in the original movies, it's kind of gone over very quickly, and then Bilbo is already here letting them escape. So I want to just try to extend it a bit and make the audience feel like these guys are really bored and stuck here. So that's all it does. That's the only reason. And I had to fully redo the audio because these shots didn't have proper sound, and then, or sound that I could use because I had music and other stuff in the background. And then the shot of Keely, yeah, is just nice because it kind of humanizes him, shows that he's looking at something that has some deeper meaning, something from back home, or maybe it's related to his family, his parents, and that is the true explanation. But we never really explain it in this edit. It's just meant to humanize him and show another side to the dwarves that they, I don't know, they're not, we want to give more to the dwarves, I feel like, in the Hobbit as much as we can. So that's my thought process with that. And the technical reason is because if we actually are at this shot, and then we go to this shot, the frames don't line up perfectly, so I had to put something in the middle, or else it wouldn't work. But anyways, that's it for Woodland Realm, and then we get to the next scene, which is the Last Light. So with this scene, I fully redid it from scratch. So this is what I was talking about when I went back to the drawing board and I looked at all the source footage and tried to just do it a better way. So this is what I've come up with. And basically the premise is Bilbo, in my original edit, he was with the dwarves, and then he kind of just was on his own, and then he was back with the dwarves again, and it kind of felt a little disjointed. So the intent with that is that we don't want to have the dwarves fully retreating and giving up instantly. We don't want to have dialogue of Balin saying that it's over and that there's nothing more to be done, and having them like literally hike down all the way off this this ledge that they're on. It's just too much too quickly. They shouldn't give up that easily after all of the stuff they've been through. So while it's okay to keep a little bit of them walking back and grumbling and complaining, all of the stuff about them like just fully leaving and giving up has been cut. So the problem with that, though, is that then now we need to have Bilbo discover the riddle, sort of the Last Light thing, on his own, and kind of pretend that the dwarves are still in this immediate area, and that they don't have to all the way come back from retreating. So what I've done is I've included two shots of Thorin from a different scene. So the first one is this one, and it's great because this is also a fun shot with the parallel between his grandfather and him. And this is from the scene when the dwarves were outside waiting for Bilbo to come back when Bilbo was with Smaug. And I did some color correction to it just to make it match. And then I've also increased, the Bilbo kind of trying to figure out what's going on and muttering words to himself about the Last Light. And so that kind of leads us to here then, when the thrush starts knocking on the door and Bilbo turns, and then Thorin turns. And so it just keeps reminding us that, yes, Thorin is still here, even though he's really not. And then before you know it, then boom, we cut to the dwarves who are noticing the door, and it just feels like, oh, no one's really left, and it's all feeling natural. And we do have Bilbo now saying, oh, the Last Light, which is basically when he discovers it. And so that's really nice. And then now we're back on track with the original movie. So that is my redone version of the Last Light. And yes, it is a little bit improved from the version I put on YouTube. I messed around with this shot in the audio here to try to make that work a bit better. Okay, so that's it for the last light, and then next up we do have a few moments in the Smaug scene actually. So I haven't really talked about these because I don't really need feedback on them. They work fine, and I think everyone agrees we would love to have more Smaug. No one complains about that. And so what the addition is number one, I wanted to make sure I got every single line that Smaug says in the movie that was taken from the book. So in my original version of the edit, I actually had trimmed a few of the lines from the book just because they were very hard to work in. But with my new editing skills that I've gathered over the years, I finally figured out a way to include them. And then number two, I also want to plant the seed for why Bilbo would not want to give the Arkenstone to Thorin, because we know there's kind of this short period before Thorin starts acting overly stubborn and not going on his word, or not sticking to his word, where we need to show that there might be a reason for Bilbo to keep holding on to it for a second, and then we see Thorin acting that way, and then now we know, okay, Bilbo's not going to give it. So to help that, we have Smaug speaking some deceptive words. So right here, after he runs away, this is a new shot of Smaug talking about how the dwarves are just using Bilbo and that he's only a means to an end. And then Bilbo's like, no, that's a lie. And so it's just like a bit of deceptive words, which is actually book accurate technically, because Smaug does speak deceptive words. That's like a trait of dragons. And what he says in the book basically makes Bilbo question, why didn't the dwarves really think this plan out more? And yes, in the movie, he's not questioning that. He's starting to question, did they, is this true? Are they using me? So it's a little bit different context, but it still honors that general idea. And then we move on. That's it. And now we're back to just normal Smaug boasting. And so the point with all these trims too, just to only have this part, is I really couldn't include anything where Smaug was saying Oakenshield or talking about the Arkenstone directly, because those are just those go against the book. I can't have those direct mentions by Smaug, and I just don't like them anyways. It doesn't make sense that Smaug would know Oakenshield, specifically the name. He just knows that there's generic dwarves outside, and that's what he knows in the book. So yeah, we return back to Smaug talking, and this is actually another line from the book that goes right here, which is Smaug says something about like a share of the treasure. He's basically questioning, like, what were you promised, a share of the treasure? I did trim it though, so he doesn't say, what did he promise you? Because Thorin hasn't been introduced here. So it's basically just Smaug saying, promised a share of the treasure, like questioning it. Like, is that what they did? And that honors the line from the book where Smaug says, let's see, a 14th share, I suppose, or something like it. So that's a cool little reference. And now we're continuing on with the normal movie, or normal edit, I should say. And then when we get to here, there's kind of this quiet period where Smaug isn't talking. And I decided I could actually insert the line where he says, let's see, no blade can pierce me, which is a direct quote from the book. So this is great because it's highlighting the kind of the irony here that he has a weakness right here. And so, yes, a blade could pierce him. And I think it just makes the moment a bit better and more book accurate as well, because that's what he says in the book. And then we cut to this shot, which this part has been extended. This shot is new from my previous edit. It's just Bilbo walking backwards, but I had to redo the audio completely from scratch. So I was very impressed with how this worked out. You know, we have sounds for Smaug's footsteps and all of the, the hitting the stone, and all that's panned to the left and the right. So it's all like proper surround sound. And then what Bilbo says during this part is he says, truly there's no equal of Smaug on this earth, something like that. And that's a direct reference again to the book when he says, truly there can nowhere be found the equal of Lord Smaug. So that's it for the Smaug scene, but I finally, can fully say that I have every line from the book that Smaug says in my version. So I'm very pleased with that. Then next up we get to the, Laketown Destruction. So this is another part that I've extended because it was very short in my original version. It was only about 3 minutes, so it's now about 4 minutes. So I've extended it, and I think that that's important because this is a very key moment in the story, so I want to give as much weight to it as possible. However, unfortunately, I can't make it any longer than that. I've literally included every possible shot that I could to make it as long as possible while still being, following the book and everything. Because if I wanted to include any more footage, it would be of Tauriel and of Alfred and going on too long, and what other characters? I guess the dwarves were here, and Bard's son. So there's just this stuff that I can't really include. So yeah, it starts out with I've included a few more miscellaneous shots of just chaos and generic flyby shots of Smaug. So I've included a few of those. And one thing I want to address is if you did see my test clip, I've actually decided not to include the shot of the wind lance on fire. This was borrowed from the Maple edit, but I did make some manual changes, as you can see. And I decided not to include that just because it didn't fully match the visual effects from the other shots, and I really care about professional quality, so I decided not to use it. And it's really not that big a deal that we can just assume the wind lance got destroyed. So then the first new part that's like properly long, other than just miscellaneous shots, is we see this extended edition part where Bard is running and Smaug almost kills him, so that's nice. And then we get back on track and he goes up here onto the tower. This is a shot that I also extended a bit. It starts to play some like emotional music, but before we can even take a moment to pause and reflect on the destruction, boom, it transitions in back to the heroic music, or tense, dramatic music where Smaug is flying towards Bard. So it's kind of a nice contrast of we want to realize, oh shoot, everyone's dying, this is sad, but then we're not able to be sad yet because Bard is a hero and he's got to take out Smaug. So then we get to this part. This is new. So this is also just helping to show progression of time, I guess, that that Bard has been shooting lots of arrows and been fighting for quite some time. Because if we just stick with Bard this whole time, he only shoots like, 4 or 5 arrows, and then he finally kills Smaug. So when we cut away to this distance shot, it kind of gives the impression that he's up there, and now we're going to focus on something else, and Bard is still shooting arrows in the background and fighting. So that's kind of the intent with this cutaway, and it helps the pacing. But also the other intent is that this is a good reference to the book, because if we go in the book, one of the lines is, their first complaints and anger were against the master who had left the town so soon, while some were still willing to defend it. So that's a good little reference showing that the master is trying to escape, directly in contrast with someone who's willing to defend it. And you can see he has a bunch of gold too, which is also a reference to how later in the book, the master, it says he took most of the gold and fled with it. So that's another little reference. And yes, it's been condensed in the movie that he's taking gold here, when really in the book he was taking gold later. But that's because in the movie version he dies after this part here, so you can't really have that. But yeah, that's really nice. And then before we can even waste too much time with Alfred and the master, and before we get to any long dialogue, it just boom cuts back to Smaug and Bard. So it really doesn't betray the idea of reducing Alfred's role. He doesn't even say anything in this line. So I know people really don't like Alfred and they don't like the master, but you don't have to worry. It's not like this is anything that's offending the audience. And then when we get to here, these are some new shots. We have one extra bow shot of Bard. This was previously cut, so that's good just to have. And now I can fully say that I have every single shot that Bard shoots at or releases at Smaug, so that's fun. And then we finally get to here, and all of this is the same. Now I will say, I guess in my 23 update I did add this dialogue here that I don't know if everyone's aware of it, but it is kind of cool. I added a line where he says something about I don't even remember. We can just play it, I guess. Yeah, he says, "You are forsaken bowman." So that's just, again, trying to include as much Smaug dialogue as possible. And it kind of breaks it up because one person had commented that what Smaug says, like, he ended both of his sentence on the same thing. And so, because of the way I edited it, and so it's kind of makes the dialogues flow better when we put a different line in the middle. So that's it for the Laketown Destruction. It's a bit longer. And so now we're going to get to the cool part. So I've saved this for last. It's also chronologically last, which is the final battle. So I've made some changes to the final battle. And I've tried to reduce it a bit more, actually, in some areas to make up for how I've increased the runtime earlier. So let's see, what do we have? Actually, before I do that, before I get to the fun part, there are a few more areas where I've trimmed runtime before the battle even starts. So let's just do that and get that out of the way, because it is important that I do reduce that runtime to make up for how I've added so much stuff. So the first is when we see, let's see, where is it? It should be right around, right about here. I've reduced this by a few seconds when Bilbo is walking around. This just saves some time, because all we need to get is the idea of Bilbo feeling conflicted and struggling. So when we have him sit down and we have him sigh, okay, we get it, Bilbo's conflicted, then we can move on. We don't need to linger on it for too long. And then what else do we have? So then when the men are walking into Dale, I've trimmed this by a few seconds. Like one of these shots, like this shot here, it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect the soundtrack. No dialogue changes. It just saves on time. And then I also actually, just for fun, swapped out this shot of Alfred close up with this just generic town folk walking, and that's good because now the last time we really see Alfred close up is that Laketown aftermath scene. So that's good because it was kind of random to have a close up of him here when we don't really see him now after this in the movie. Okay, and then when we get to here, this is actually both a dialogue change and saving on runtime change. So there was this line where Thorin says, "Those who have lived through Dragonfire should rejoice. They have much to be grateful for." So that I actually realized, and this is something I got inspired by from, I believe his channel is, it's the guy I did the commentary with, is like Random is like his nickname online, but the guy that I made the commentary with a couple months ago with both of us just talking, it's on his YouTube channel. He actually inspired me to make this change because he pointed out that this really does make Thorin just seem like a complete crazy guy, because it's just not founded in any logic to say that. Like, obviously, yes, they should be happy that they survived, but so much was lost and destroyed. So it's a complete cope by Thorin to say that, and it makes him seem a little bit crazy. So, let's see. That means the scene ends on. Let's see. We'll play it.
Well enough for hardship.
So he ends off the scene. Now he says, "Well, let me just play it."
I've lost everything.
Do not tell me what they have lost.
So when he says, "Do not tell me what they have lost," that's showing that Thorin is still upset about, his past, that he lost everything, and so he doesn't care too much what they lost because
I know well enough that.
he knows well enough their hardship. So yes, it's still showing Thorin as like overly stubborn and not really caring about others, but it is some empathy. He is genuinely saying that he knows well enough their hardship, and that's where the dialogue ends. And he looks off, because then when he goes down and basically doubles down and says, like, yeah, they shouldn't even care that Smaug destroyed everything. They should be happy. That is just going a bit too far. And I think that with my overall goals of trying to make Thorin seem less crazy and more like realistic, so that his change in Battle of the Five Armies makes sense, I think that this really just contributes to it. It makes him feel like he's actually making a valid point. I mean, you might disagree, you might think he's sounding rude, but he makes a fair point. He also lost everything too. It happens. So I mean, yes, it is kind of their fault essentially, but I just don't like that when he doubles down and says that they should basically be happy that they survived. So yeah, we show Bilbo still starting to doubt, well, not doubt, but just not sure what to think about Thorin. He doesn't want to give the Arkenstone. He's very just disappointed that Thorin is acting this way. And then when we get to here, I've also saved some runtime and also fixed some continuity, which is that we normally cut to a close-up of Gandalf riding, but he was all bloodied in the face, and then he wasn't bloodied in the face, but next when we see him, he is bloodied in the face, and that was just a continuity error by Peter Jackson. So by cutting that close-up, that fixes it, saves runtime, and also actually I think it kind of is fun because it keeps us in more suspense when we don't see the character's face close up. Like it just adds a little bit more anticipation that we want to see Gandalf return. Like you would expect to see his face here, but we don't, and it kind of cuts off. And obviously the soundtrack and stuff has been perfectly smoothed out, so it doesn't feel weird. But I think it kind of adds a bit more to our anticipation of Gandalf returning when we don't show his close up. Because some people might not even realize it's Gandalf, I guess. But I mean, it's pretty obvious. He has a staff, a pointy hat. But yeah, so we don't show his close up face, and it kind of just adds the idea that there's, I don't know, maybe like unresolved stuff that needs to be done. And so then when he does show up here, we resolve, well, I guess it's later, but we do resolve what Gandalf, why he was gone, and what he discovered while he was gone, and that kind of resolves it. So then another trim is when Thranduil and Bard are talking about the dwarves. It goes on a little long, and they kind of just explain it to the audience overly in detail, because Bard is clearly against war. He's saying, "You will go to war over gems, like, let me speak with them." And then so I've decided we just end the scene off with Thranduil looking like, okay, I guess you can try. That's kind of the vibe I get from him. Like, he's a little bit surprised that Bard would try to reason with him. but he's going to allow it. And so then we cut to here, and that just saves on time, and it also reduces some redundant dialogue, because after this, then Thranduil normally would question, you would try to reason with the dwarves, like as if that's some crazy concept, when literally Thranduil was just trying to reason with them in a previous scene to make a deal with Thorin. And, you know, Thranduil's been alive for hundreds of years. He's not going to suddenly change his opinion on dwarves and reasoning with them in just a few hours, or just a few days, I should say. So that's why I cut that, and it, again, just saves on time. Then, let's see, what else do we have? When Thorin is asking about buying back the Arkenstone, I've kept the awkward long pause, because in the book it even says, and they sat there for a moment of silence, something like that. But the pause was a little bit too long, and so it just saves on runtime. It's right about here. Again, no dialogue trims or anything, but just tidying it up. And that's it for saving on runtime. So now we get to the battle. So first off, I've added a few more seconds of generic slashing, because I originally cut this in my 2023 update, but it's back. So this was in my 2021 version, just Thranduil doing this. Normally it just cut to here, but yeah, this few seconds is back. And then also, this is new. Instead of ending the scene on, well, I'll just play it out. I don't know if the audio cuts out. I mean, when I do playback while recording it, sometimes like my CPU isn't very good, so it sometimes cuts out and the audio might sound weird, but trust me, the audio is fine. But instead of ending the scene right here, it has this full shot of him hitting the orc, and then it ends, and I think that just flows a lot better. And then another thing to improve the flow is right here, that the soundtrack was kind of awkward when it started because I trimmed so much, but I've just fully redone it, and now that the soundtrack is genuinely just starting, you know, from my actual soundtrack clip, rather than like halfway into the soundtrack, basically from the original movie. I've actually pulled the soundtrack from the soundtrack and put it in. So yeah, it slowly fades in, and then this is new here, just to ease us into the sad montage. We show Bard fighting, the men starting to fall back. I like this bow shot up from this random guy, it's good. And then this is also new, then just the trolls are starting to enter, and then we go to here. So it normally would just go from here to basically to here, and the soundtrack was really truncated, but it just flows a lot better. And then we continue with normal. So then I've also done a few trims in this scene. So there are some awkward pauses that I trimmed out, and it doesn't need to have those awkward pauses in like Dwalin doesn't need to be walking for so long. You know, this is fine. And I think removing those awkward pauses just helps to show Thorin as less crazy. Yes, he is pretty crazy in this scene to a degree, but we don't need to show him as as crazy as he was in the originals. And one thing I did that is a creative change is I also removed when he says we must move the gold further underground. Instead, he says we must move further underground to safety, and he says that right here. He's like, that is it. We must move further underground to safety, and that's basically referring to how he said, you know, there's the holes in this mountain that go deep, and we can barricade ourselves. And so it's kind of just shifting Thorin from being legitimately crazy, because obviously there's no way they're going to be able to put the gold further underground. Like the gold holder is so massive that would just never be possible. So instead of being legitimately crazy, he makes a valid point. If you're going to be a coward, you know, move further underground. So I think it just makes Thorin seem less crazy. So he wants to move further underground. He's being a coward. He normally isn't a coward. And so Dwalin says this, and then that kind of changes Thorin's mind. He realizes, you know what? Why am I being a coward? I shouldn't be a coward. And then he returns, and it leaves it a little bit mysterious. And I really like ending the scene off here instead of using that deleted scene I made, because now we're like in a bit of suspense. Is Thorin going to come back? And then we learn, oh, he is, and it's kind of a surprise. But I think this helps his transition to remove the overly huge focus on the treasure hoard itself, because that was all because of the dragon sickness and his obsession with gold in the originals. But just to be safe, I want to clarify that there is still plenty of references to Thorin's obsession with gold. You know, he says, here, it says this right here.
Many die in war.
Here.
But a treasure.
So, but a treasure such as this, and blah, blah, blah. He goes on. So he still is going to be obsessed with the treasure like the book, but it's just not to a degree where he's going to say something as crazy as we must push all the gold further underground. Like, that's just not going to happen. They have 13 dwarves inside. But yeah, so the next step is, let's see. We charge out, all of this is the same, and Bilbo is knocked out. I did slightly redo the dwarf fighting here. I think in my previous version I cut out Bomber doing this. I might cut this out. You know, if you're in this far in the video, let me know if you want to keep this. I might just do a poll. I think personally having one little silly Bomber thing just adds a bit to his character, adds a bit of charm. Even if it is silly, it's not like anything he did is physically impossible. He just kicked over an orc. So let me know if we should keep that. But anyways, I've tidied up the montage a little bit. And then this is where I've done some more drastic changes. So Fili dies and they rush in, and I've redone this bit. So Thorin and Azog are fighting, but this is a new cutaway that was never in any of my edits before, of Kili just looking back and forth fighting, and then back to Thorin fighting, and then back to Kili fighting. And I like having the closer intercuts here just because it really highlights them fighting and the idea that Kili is trying to fight towards him. And also another thing is I've fully redid the soundtrack, so now these soundtrack transitions from here to here are from the official soundtrack. In the movie, they actually cut the soundtrack early, but in the actual soundtrack, it continues further. So yes, right here, this is a custom transition, but it's pretty seamless. And then when we go from here to here, this is again another official soundtrack transition. So I'm really happy with that, that if you can try to keep as many official transitions as possible, it just makes it more smooth rather than having to do my own custom blending. And so I've made sure to keep all of this Azog dueling here because, and this is all basically the same. Actually, one thing I did do, I'll show this. I'm trying to see. Okay, so when Azog knocks him down, I've redone the sound and I've removed his dialogue here. It just wasn't really necessary. He said go in for the kill, and I don't know, I like removing Azog's dialogue a bit because obviously they had much more of his dialogue in the original movies because it was this whole Thorin versus Azog feud that lasted for several movies and they were fleshing out Azog's character more, but we don't really need all that to be fleshed out. And I've added more sound effects to show that right here I like added a slashing and orc groan sound effect, so it sounds like Thorin is killing this orc and then we cut away before we even know what happens. And so that way then when we have Kili die, this is new, we cut back to here with Azog, and we see that Thorin is knocked onto the ground still after he killed that orc. And then so that's just kind of a new flow that I think fits better. And then this is where we get to kind of a drastic change, which is now we show that okay, Azog is still ready to fight. He has reinforcements. We have sad music that we're starting to lose. Now we cut to some heroes starting to lose, and we really start to question: are we going to lose again? We already had a sad montage before, but now we have one again. And then we have the bats coming, and the dwarves are not looking too good. And then we focus on this shot of a dead person, and then we cut to black, and the music fades out. It kind of like builds up to this moment. All the music has been building up, all the footage has been building up to just this, and it kind of lets us sit on the theme of death and how war is not glorious. And that's just referencing the book, how there's some good quotes about that from Bilbo. And it is true in the book, there are kind of two sad parts. There's the part where right before Thorin charges out, we start losing and we think we're all gonna die. And then also right before the eagles show up, there's another sad part where we're like, okay, we're gonna lose and war is not glorious. So now my battle really does follow the flow of the book, and we cut to black here, and then we resume with Thorin and Azog, and then boom, before everyone does lose, the eagles show up. And so it's like we keep having these back and forths of losing and winning and losing and winning, and that just creates a dynamic, exciting battle that has interesting beats. So we have skipped over the actual ice duel of Thorin and Azog, which I think just went on too long and was really there to pay off the whole feud of the entire movie that these characters had, whereas in my version they don't have that feud. So they don't need to fight for so long. We already have them dueling here, still dueling, cutting away to Kili, and then still dueling, and then cut away to Kili, and then we're still fighting. So yes, it's not going to be minutes and minutes of dueling, but we already get the idea that they're fighting plenty. And then even right here, Azog comes out, and so I think they still have plenty of fighting. We still show that Azog is the important commander that needs to be taken out. We still show that Thorin is making a sacrifice. So I just don't get. I've had some people say that it's bad to remove this ice tool, but I think if it's done properly in this latest version, this version is not the same as any of my test clips. All those test clips are scrapped. This is going to be completely new, but I think it works perfectly fine to not show so much of Azog dueling, because we already get all the main beats and all the main ideas. So I don't understand. The only reason you'd want to have more dueling is just for the sake of having more fighting. It doesn't actually contribute to the story really. And then we even here, yeah, still have more fighting of those two. And I actually added this shot here, which breaks up the flow. Well, not breaks up the flow, it helps the flow, because we have audio in the background of Thorin getting knocked to the ground. So then boom, when we cut to here, we see that reaction. And I think that flows better, because in my original edit, I just cut right to Thorin being knocked down. And obviously the reason for this is Azog previously jumped out from under the ice on top of Thorin, and that's just physically impossible. That can't happen in my edit. I would much rather have a slightly sudden, oh wait, Thorin's knocked on the ground, than have that completely ridiculous thing. So that's another thing people should keep in mind when, I get comments about this part, but would you really rather have the whole thing where Thorin has Azog slip underwater, and then he's swimming underwater, and then all of a sudden Azog somehow jumps out from ice under the water and knocks him down? Like, that is just pretty ridiculous. So yeah, and then we get to here, and I've actually done a trim to kind of reduce this just by a few seconds, and same with here, reduce this by a few seconds, because we're not paying off a few to 3 whole movies. We don't need to have, staring at Azog dead for 5 seconds. It can be 3 seconds, whatever. So that is it for all the update changes. Now, I will say technically these are all still potential changes. If I really want to change my mind last minute, if I get some feedback, I will. And I also will be posting this full final battle, which you can watch in the description if you want to check it out. So I really would love to get some feedback on the final battle. Watch it in its entirety, watch it on the big screen, pretend that you have never seen any of these movies, you're just going in fresh, because I know I've done this too, and I'm sure many people have left feedback who have done this, that they focus too hard on comparing to what could be added, and instead of just looking at what the scene is for what it is in my version. It is tricky to separate the original footage from what we have here. But I think if you genuinely analyze this battle, like ignore the book even, just follow the beats and the flow of it, I think it makes sense and audiences would understand it. Even though I've removed some of the ice duel here, it's not like it's going to all of a sudden be confusing on what our character motives are or what is going on in the story. And it is true that I don't want there to be no weight to this battle. Obviously, when you remove a lot of battling, you can accidentally make it have no weight. So I am conscious of that, which is why I've included as much as possible of the duel here. And obviously, we still have Feely's death here, which is it's supposed to be sad, and Keely's death, which is also sad, so that gives good weight. But yeah, just keep that in mind if you're going to watch this and give feedback. But any feedback is welcome. Even if you don't like it, just let me know. I really am trying to make this work. Trying to make the battle as close to the book as possible while still being an entertaining cinematic battle. So I'm going to cut the video off there. I know I went on for quite a while. So yeah, if you watch this whole thing, thanks for watching. And please check out the description and leave some feedback if you have the time. All right, bye.